Hello, welcome to Culture Hash. Today we're going to begin with some shock news. I own a shirt. Unbelievable, right? Well, I wanted to look my best to discuss the new album from Slowthai, Nothing Great About Britain. Nothing Great About Britain is his debut album, and Slowthai has been building a bit of buzz since the release of two well-received EPs in the last couple of years. Slowthai is quite interesting because he comes from Northampton, that East Midlands hub of hip-hop talent and just general talent that's probably best known at this point for producing Des O'Connor, the TV presenter. It's pretty interesting to see the UK hip-hop scene diversify outside of London, and we're starting to get people like Jaykae from Birmingham, who's actually featured on this album, Bugsy Malone from Manchester, and of course Slowthai here. It's refreshing to hear stories from people that exist outside of that bubble of London. Slowthai's sound is influenced heavily by grime, especially the classic early days when Dizzee, Rascal and the Streets were the biggest thing going in the UK hip-hop scene, and both of these guys have got a serious influence on Slowthai. His delivery at times is very reminiscent of Dizzee Rascal, especially in his cadence, in the way that Slowthai just merges words together, and just sort of like his pronunciation of some words is very much reminiscent of Dizzee Rascal. Whereas the subject matter and focus on some of the hypocrisies of Britain and the class divide feel very much inspired by the Streets. And the beat for Toaster sounds like something you would have heard on original pirate material. Slowthai is also influenced by Radiohead and the general ethos of punk music. On the album cover, Slowthai is naked in the stocks outside of the Northampton council estate that he grew up on. And in the background we've got people like burning flags of Great Britain. The cover is reminiscent of that picture of Johnny Rotten being crucified. And the beat for Doorman is basically just punk. It's produced by Mura Masa, and there are these big guitars, really rapid fire drums. This is the only track on the album that has these big guitars and pounding drums, but it shows that Slowthai is versatile enough not to just make an album that is just exploring grime. As you'd expect for an album called Nothing Great About Britain, it's very critical of the state that Britain is in at the moment, the class inequality, and Slowthai is very critical of the Queen on this album. On the title track, he calls her a cunt. It feels like an updated version of like God Save the Queen, but in 2019, instead of this sarcasm of God Save the Queen, he just calls her a cunt. Bit more direct, and it's actually a good song. Slowthai's got some really good bars on here. He says he's not Dizzee, he's just a boy in the corner. I mean, like, my delivery obviously isn't as good as his, but there are some really good bars on Nothing Great About Britain. The beat has got this old school grime feel, and I'm talking like really early grime, when the difference between grime and garage was very merged, like basically like the first Streets album. This can be heard in the haunting synths and rapid fire percussion on here. And having Nothing Great About Britain as the opening track really sets this theme up for the listener, as Slowthai just continues to explore these double standards in class in Britain. An example being on Doorman, where Slowthai's trying to chat up like this posh girl in a club and it just goes tits up for him. He trades bars with Jaykae on the track Grow Up, where they both talk about the struggles of growing up poor in Britain. I quite like Jaykae's verse on here. He obviously starts off by shouting out Small Heath. He does this on every song, it's basically his catchphrase at this point. Small Heath. He's quite playful in here. He talks about how you can't buy like 10 decks of cigarettes anymore, you have to go to 20, and he just keeps dropping in references to smoking throughout his verse. It's quite interesting. It's quite a interesting little device that Jaykae uses on his verse here. On the track Inglorious, Slowthai teams up with Skepta, another figure who's quite influential on the way Slowthai approaches his raps. The beat's quite menacing, which suits the dark narratives that Slowthai and Skepta both deliver on this track. They've got good chemistry on here, and Skepta's been quite an early advocate for Slowthai, and he's done a good job of helping him be a bit more promoted in the UK scene. Slowthai's got some great personal moments on here. I like the track Gorgeous, where he talks about his upbringing and his friends and like police profiling. I think the chorus is quite good about how there's like 5 deep of them in handcuffs in the back of a police car, just like it's a routine thing for his youth. I like the video for this as well. It really suits the nostalgic theme of Gorgeous. And we actually see Slowthai rap in the Northampton Town football stadium, which is I think the first time I've ever seen anyone rap in this stadium before, or even wear a Northampton Town football shirt. It's good that we're getting so much regional variation on rappers in the UK scene at the moment. and the outro for Gorgeous is a touching anecdote involving his stepdad. It's an amusing anecdote about how they both went to a football game and were looking for a towel and missed most of the first half. Slowthai says it in quite a humorous way, so it's quite touching in that regard. It sounds like a bit of a warm memory from his childhood. It's quite cool. I like Gorgeous. I like the personal touches that Slowthai puts on this album. And we go a bit deeper into Northampton on the track Northampton's Child, the closer for the standard version of Nothing Great About Britain. On Northampton's Child, we get the story of Slowthai's mum, the trials and tribulations she's faced, being a young mother, having 3 kids, like bringing them all up alone. Slowthai displays some real passion on this track, and the track is just dripping with love for his mum and just appreciation for the sacrifices she made for him when she was young. And there's real emotion when he talks about the death of his brother, who was an infant at the time, and just the impact it had on him and his family. He talks about how his mum just started going out with a drug dealer one day, and even though he treated her nice, he wasn't really a good person to be around. Northampton's Child is a really emotional track. It's really personal to Slowthai, and it's a great way to close out Nothing Great About Britain. I really enjoyed listening to Nothing Great About Britain. The standard version of the album is about half an hour long. He's got a unique perspective on these issues of class, as he grew up in somewhere a bit different from the majority of the UK rappers you hear from. There's a significant amount of deluxe tracks on here, and they add about 20 minutes to the running order. The deluxe tracks aren't anything too special really. There's songs like Polaroid, which has an interesting hook, but it feels a bit like strip club music. It's a bit like shake it, yeah, shake it like a Polaroid, yeah, yeah. The ideas on the deluxe tracks are a bit less focused, and they touch a bit more on the rap cliches that Slowthai has mainly avoided throughout Nothing Great About Britain. I do like the track Tea and Biscuits, a significant track in Slowthai's discography as it helped him get noticed in the mainstream. And I like the deconstruction of race in Britain on Rainbow. Slowthai's a bit like me in the fact that he's mixed race, but a lot of people might not realise he's half black. So I can identify with the themes on Rainbow. But for the most part, the deluxe edition tracks aren't really anything to write home about, I suppose. I really enjoyed Nothing Great About Britain. I think Slowthai's got a lot of things to say, and he tackles some big subjects in an engaging and relatable way. He's got some really interesting insights on modern Britain, and the criticisms he has throughout Nothing Great About Britain are extremely relevant in today's day and age. I thought Nothing Great About Britain was a really enjoyable debut album. Even though it's got some big subjects on here, it never really got too heavy, and I loved hearing more about Slowthai's story and getting to understand him a bit more as a person. So for me, Slowthai, Nothing Great About Britain is worthy of 8 out of 10.